Welcome. This is the Cisco CCNA ENSA, also known as the Enterprise Networking Security and Automation course. This course focuses on the CCNA version 7 curriculum. This is course 3 of 3. Moving forward, we have common network attacks. So these are the attacks that are going to be more susceptible to attacks. Normally, common network attacks are going to be like denial of service attacks or DDoS attacks or DOS attacks, access-based attacks, as well as sniffing and reconnaissance-based attacks. There is a video in our course shell covering the common types of attacks, but again, this is pretty self-explanatory of how these are and how they function after you complete the reading and the lab. A reconnaissance attack is just a way to gather recon or reconnaissance. They gather information. That could be as quickly as doing an nmap scan or as simple as an nmap scan. You will gather information about your target by doing some basic recon. And normally there are different techniques. It could be a ping, it could be a vulnerability scan, it could be an exploit tool like a Metasploit or the set tool. It could be as simple as doing some open source intelligence gathering like Google searching or Google dorking. That's all passive. Or it could be more active reconnaissance like scanning the network, in-mapping their network, or running vulnerability software against the network. There are some videos in the course shell about the techniques used for password attacks or other techniques. And we keep saying things like access-based attacks, but they didn't really organize this quite well. Access-based attacks are password attacks or spoofing attacks or port redirections or man-in-the-middle based attacks. We also have our social engineering based attacks. These are going to be social engineering tools that are used in conjunction with access attacks to attempt to manipulate individuals into performing a sequence. A spear phishing email, for example, could be a targeted email with the hopes of the victim clicking on a link, thus allowing the attacker to gain access to the victim's system. And that could be a social engineering based attack. Again, common social engineering attacks are using like phishing or spear phishing or spam. Tailgating is a big one. Tailgating is when you follow an authorized person in quickly behind them before like the door closes, for example. Dumpster diving, looking through their garbage. Or shoulder surfing. That's where the threat actor looks over someone's shoulder to steal content off their screen or possibly their passwords. Spam is also classified as a social engineering attack. Even though this is more junk mail, this might have harmful links or malware or deceptive contents. My favorite is my Amazon account is locked, and it's coming from Joe Blow at azn.com. And it's like, okay, that's not Amazon, but I get tons of them. Again, a social engineering attack will use the set toolkits, and normally this is where user awareness comes into play. Things like locking your system when you leave, never reusing passwords or related passwords. Don't be releasing work information on social media sites. This may seem pretty standard, but you'll be surprised how many people do this. Using username and passwords that are left on a sticky note on a system, or giving your username and password to someone. Always destroying confidential information per policy. Having policies that say to do certain things. We do have labs on social engineering. We do have a video on our DDoS and DOS-based attacks. Again, DOS and DDoS is overwhelming a target based off of having a larger quantity of traffic target them. A DDoS is a distributed version of that. That way, instead of having one system target, we can have multiple systems target a victim. And that can also be done with maliciously formatted packets to overwhelm the victim's system. Next major section is vulnerability and threats. There is a video looking at the techniques for ICMP-based attacks, amplification attacks, reflection attacks in our core shell. So we're not going to go over those in depth. IPv4 and IPv6 based threats. That could be, again, ICMP attacks. That's where someone will use an echo packet or ping to discover subnets. We have application and reflection based attacks. That's normally where we're going to be using a DOS attack to attempt to prevent legitimate users from accessing information. Spoofing, that's where we're going to be spoofing our layer 3 data. Man-in-the-middle attacks, these are threat actor positioning themselves between the source and destination, thus controlling the flow of communication to and from. And session hijacking is where you gain access to a network access or a session so that you can steal information. ICMP attacks, again, that's either ICMP v4 or ICMP v6, and that is where you're going to be using the ICMP for reconnaissance and scanning access. And again, this is where you restrict ICMP access via an ACL or an IDS or IPS to prevent access or to prevent information from being gained, but that is not as realistic as people seem. We have echo request and echo reply. We have ICMP unreachable. That's where the network reporting reconnaissance and attacks are using ICMP messages that are not being able to be reached. We have a mask relay, and that's mapping the internal network. Redirects, and that is normally used by man-in-the-middle based attacks. And then we have ICMP router discovery, and that is where we inject bogus routes in the route table of unsuspecting victims. Again, we have a video looking at amplification, reflection, and spoofing based attacks, but essentially we have a threat actor that will use their botnets to target a victim, and this is more of an amplification and reflection. The threat actor will use amplification techniques to perform a DDoS attack or other form of attack to overwhelm the targets. Address spoofing is looking at either non-binding or blinding spoofing, and that will be the threat actor will use the traffic that's sent between hosts and the target. In a non-binding attack, the spoofing will determine the state of a firewall and sequence number to inject authorized sessions. With blind spoofing, they do not worry about the sequence number or the state of the firewall. They just inject data and blindly hope that it goes through. And that is it for this module. If you got any questions or concerns, please reach out. Thank you.